Hi everyone, so tonight we're going to read chapter 15 and 16 of our book The Christmasaurus. I'm really sorry there wasn't a video last night, but we had the school Christmas fair, so things were a wee bit frantic. So chapter 15, The Hunter. It was Christmas Eve and William was getting ready for bed, unusually early, as all children should on Christmas Eve. But not before placing a mince pie for the reindeer and a carrot for Santa on the wonky little wooden table by the chimney. I bet you thought Santa eats the mince pies and the reindeer eat the carrots, but that's the most common Christmas Eve mistake, as Mr. Trundle would have knowingly said each year. Mr. Trundle tucked William into bed, and although he desperately wanted to stay awake for as long as possible, he was so worn out with Christmas excitement he fell fast asleep within 8.8 seconds of his head touching the pillow. William managed to stay awake for a little longer, but eventually they were both fast asleep. As William lay snoozing, dreaming of Christmassy dreams in his head, he was completely unaware of those tiny little hairs in his arms and his neck were all standing on end again. They were standing on end again because William was still being watched. Outside, it had been snowing heavily all day. All the rooftops of William Street were already thickly covered in white freezing fluff that was as smooth as icing on a Christmas cake, all except one rooftop, whose perfectly fallen snow had been disturbed by something. 2 sets of footprints were scattered around the roof, drawing little circles in the snow. Someone was there, and judging by the hundreds of steps, they must have been pacing backwards and forth for quite a while. The owners of these footprints were a man and his dog, but they weren't pacing anymore. They were as still as statues, hiding behind the chimney. But what were a man and a dog doing on a rooftop opposite William's house on Christmas Eve? Why had they been spying on William for the past few days and weeks? And why were they not sitting now out of sight in the freezing snow? Who were they? Well, I will tell you. This man was evil. This man was the Hunter. The Hunter was an old man with ceased leathery skin, and his face was a large lumpy white scar that came from his eye down to his chin. He wore an old looking hunting hat and a long peacock feather sticking proudly out of it. The poor peacock's head was now in the handle of an umbrella, and he was already smoking a crooked pipe made of ivory even in his sleep. Excuse me. Its sickly bitter smoke hung in the air for hours, and if you were standing next to him in smoke, you would stink your nostrils most unpleasantly. The most obvious thing about him, though, was just how incredibly posh he was. He looked posh, smelt posh, walked and talked posh. Even the way he was crouching behind the chimney was posh. In fact, he was so posh that his socks were made of pure gold thread and they only blew his nose with a real £10 note. The Hunter was the oldest son of a very wealthy man, and when his father died, the Hunter inherited piles and piles of family gold. He kept it all to himself in a huge vault inside the family mansion and refused to let anyone else inside. He shut himself away from his family, from the world. Even the annual Christmas cards from distant relatives couldn't drag him away from counting his wealth. He loved money, he loved gold, but most of all, he loved hunting. He started hunting poor, innocent animals when he was a little boy. While his filthy rich parents were away on long exotic holidays, he would be left at home with his nanny, who was too busy looking after his perfect baby brother to pay him any attention. First, he hunted the neighbour's cat with a trap made of leftover chopsticks, the ones that no one ever wants from the Chinese takeaway. He followed it with more than the next day he set up a pet hamster free in the garden hedge maze, which he'd hunted down with a slingshot made from the neighbour's cat's bones. Then he released his goldfish into a moat and hunted it using a snooker cue and a billiard room as a sphere. Back then, when he was little, the hunter was known as Huxley, but one long winter holiday at home from boarding school, he managed to track and hunt every single animal in a 12-mile radius from the family mansion. From then on, he became known only as the Hunter. Huxley was no more. Over the years, the animals he liked to hunt had become more and more exotic and more rare, and the animal more rare, he wanted to kill it. He hunted lions and tigers, bears and monkeys, zebras and giraffes, and were always near rare enough for Hunter anymore. He liked to hunt the really ridiculously rare animals, creatures so rare that most people would never have heard of them, but they're all very rare. He had been a horn of a unicorn, which he hunted in the glacier of Greenland. He had the paw of a pink polar bear, where he'd shot in the crossbow on the foot of a rainbow. He had the ear of a pandaroo, the gills of a horse shark, and the tail of a snarl whale, the tongue of a fang beast, the snout of a pigfish, and the wing of 20,000 flying ants he'd swatted in Sweden on a flying ant day. He hunted creatures of all sorts. And he once shot them. He had heads mounted on the walls of his fabulous bleak and large mansion. However, wherever the hunter went, his loyal dog Growler followed. Growler had been Hunter's trusty companion for many years. He did anything the hunter told him to do, because if he didn't, he knew he would end up as a head on the mansion wall. But why were Hunter and Growler hiding in the rooftops of the snow on Christmas Eve? And why had they been secretly spying on William for the past few weeks? Sorry. Well, I was just about to tell you this before you interrupted me. You see, one Christmas Eve, a very long time ago, when Hunter was still called Huxley, he had seen the most fantastic sight any boy could have ever seen. He had seen flying reindeer. His younger brother had had something in the sky over the mansion. Someone was singing. Then all of a sudden, a gigantic sleigh had burst through the break in the snow clouds. The little boy had called for his brother, and that's when Huxley had seen them. 9 magnificent flying reindeers. By golly gosh, Huxley had said, flying reindeer, I don't believe my eyes. They have to be the rarest creature in the world, explained Huxley's little brother. And they were. I must have one, Huxley had cried. From that night on, the hunter's life had changed. All of his thoughts were about all he wanted was the head of a magnificently magical flying reindeer hanging on his wall over his fireplace. It was all the dreams about. Ever since that night, he had focused on his hunting efforts by tracking Santa down to clear shot at one of the rare creatures. And a few weeks ago, he had seen something that gave him the wickedly evil idea. A young sad boy sitting in a wheelchair with his ridiculously festively dressed father. It was William. Look at the boy there, Growler, a useless lump of sadness in a wheelchair. The hunter said to his dog, a young sad boy in a wheelchair, tut, very pathetic. He continued with a cunning smile growing on his face. The hunter had had an idea. By golly gosh, Growler, I do believe I have found a way to get to the flying reindeer. He cried with an evil twinkle in his posh black eyes. We've been trying to find them all these years, but we've been doing it all wrong, my furry friend. He thumped his dog on the back of the horrid excitement. We need to let the Santa bring those fantastic flying beasts to us. Do you see, you stupid mutt? How should Santa possibly not pay this poor pathetic boy a visit on Christmas? Of course he did. He's idiotic little flea bag. You understand? We'll follow this boy, set up camp on the roof and wait for Christmas Eve. Santa will swoop down from the sky with a garish sleigh of his, And when he slides down to the boy's chimney, those magical deer of his will be left all alone, in plain sight. That's what I'll do. I'll shoot them. Growler, I'll shoot them all. Hunter let out a crackle and rubbed his greedy hands together with delight at the thought of shooting Santa's flying reindeer. What a horrible man, boys and girls. We'll finally have them in the heads of the rarest creatures on the planet, hanging in our glorious wall above the fireplace. He let out an almighty manic laugh. Growler was huffed by the sigh of relief, thankful that he wasn't the dog and not the flying reindeer. So the hunter and his dog followed, William all the way home, staying hidden in the shadows. They watched for every movement. They saw him be creamed at the supermarket. They were waiting inside the post office, and now they were sitting on the rooftop opposite William's wonky little house, waiting for Santa's sleigh to appear. For night was Christmas Eve. Tonight the hunter would shoot the magnificently magical reindeer. What a horrible man, isn't he? Let's see what happens next. The rarest creature in the planet, chapter 16. Everything was still. The hunter and his dog Growler stared out into the snow, like a desert of empty rooftops, keeping their sight firmly set on one particular one, William Trundle's. At midnight, a chime from the town clock tower echoed through the streets, filling the air with loads of clong, then another and another. It was almost time. The hunter could feel that his evil bones. Growler sensed it too, as he shuffled nervously in the snow underneath. Suddenly, everything seemed to stop. The snow stopped falling as it hung in the air as if someone was pressed pause. The chimes of the clock tower was stopped early too. Time seemed to stand still. Santa arrived. Whoosh! The enormous sleigh burst out of the clouds, and such a clatter of surprise in the entire town didn't wake up in the jingle of sleigh bells and Christmas carols blasting out of this swirly brass horn of Santa's gramophone. The hunter's beady, greedy eyes lit up, and the rarest creatures on the planet swooped directly over his head. He could have reached up and touched them if he dared, but that would have given him the game away, and he wanted his heads to hang on his wall. Then he needed to stay hidden. The hunter cracked his gnarling knuckles and tightened his grip around his most prized possession, a fully shot-o-matic, mega precision, bangerific, legal sniper rifle. It was an awful machine for an awful man. He had never left home without it, even if he had been popping out for to buy milk. It was the long barrel and so straight you could have used it as a ruler, and on top of the telescopic sight, so powerful that you looked down the clear day, you could see all the way round the world until you saw the back of your own head. Santa circled the sleigh above the town a few times, making sure he had found exactly the right house. He'd been known to make some mistakes in the past. Finally, he landed the sleigh on William's rooftop. It was a smooth landing, although it was a large sleigh and the herd of galloping reindeer. Santa couldn't take his eyes off them. They were the creatures he had been dreaming. The hunter couldn't keep his eyes off them. These were the creatures he had been dreaming about for what felt like his whole life. Oh my, he whispered to Growler. They're even more magnificent than I remember. And they really were. Now get out of the sleigh, fatty, and disappear down the chimney, said Hunter, muttering under his breath as he watched Santa climb down from the sleigh. Oh, what a wonderful sight, cried Santa to his dear. Oh, lovely soft landing that was, my dears. Well done. Jolly smooth indeed. I can tell you've been practicing hard. Oops. Pays off when you're really wonky little roof like this. Doesn't leave much room for error. But the deer weren't paying attention to Santa. They were sniffing the air. Something smelt funny. Something was stinging their nostrils. It was smoke. Pipe smoke. The deer grunted and shuffled nervously, but Santa paid no notice to them. "Oh, hush now, my dearies. I won't be a minute." And then he went to the back into the clouds, Santa said as he stuffed round the back of the sleigh and reached in with one arm to retrieve William's gift. "Where is it?" he said as he fumbled around. "Ah, here it is." He gave it a tug and didn't want to budge. He tugged it again, then it stayed put, almost as if he was pulling it from the other end. That's odd," he said as he tried it one last time. He put a big black shiny boot on the lip of the sleigh and pulled with all his might. Pop! It came free, and the dinosaur-shaped package flew out of the sleigh and into Santa's arms. Santa gave a little chuckle and plodded over to the chimney. Then something very strange happened. It was almost as if the entire world grew very large all of a sudden, while Santa remained the same size. Faster than you could say jingle bells, everything grew. The rooftops, the sleigh, the sky, the reindeer, the house, and especially the goodness. They all blew up in like massive magical balloons, but Santa stayed exactly the same size as before. Now that's everything was extra large. Santa was just the right size to plop his fat belly into the mammoth hole at the top of the chimney and slide down with care. The hunter was dumbfounded. He'd never seen such a magic before. It gave him the spooks. He quickly forgot about that though, as he suddenly realised it was time had come. The moment he'd been waiting for. His horrid plan was working perfectly. He raised his heavy, deadly sniper rifle and a super zoom scope and pressed firmly against his bloodshot eye. Down the telescopic sight, he could see sitting perfectly right 8 magnificently flying reindeers. They were on plain sight, clear as day, sitting ducks. He put his long, posh fingers round the cold metallic trigger and lined up the crosshair of his sight. "It's almost too easy," said Hunter, whispering to Growler. "Even you could make this shot." He took a deep puff of the pipe hung from his chapped lips and held his breath for a moment to steady his aim. He squinted down the sight until a tear of evil excitement plopped over his bottom eyelid and ran down his scared cheek. "Finally have you." But as his finger tightened on the trigger, just before he took the shot, the hunter saw something. Something was moving in the back of the sleigh. "What the devil?" he said as he aligned his scope to see better and have a greater look at what was causing the commotion. Toy sacks were bumping around, bobbing up and down as if something was underneath them. And that was when he saw it. A shiny blue scaly head popped up from the sacks. "I didn't believe my eyes," said Hunter, stuttering with the pipe dropped and open, gobsmacked mouth. He stared. It's a real living dinosaur." The hunter's life was once more again changed forever. Everything he thought he wanted, he suddenly didn't want anymore. "A real live dinosaur, Growler. Did you know what that means?" said Hunter, said frantically as he wiped the lens of his sniper rifle scope with that very second, to have a second, third and fourth look, just to check that what he was seeing was real. "Take a look, you stupid hound," he said, shoving the scope in Growler's eyes. "Those reindeer mean nothing to me now. Look, there's a rooftop full of them, hardly what you would call rare," he said as he yanked back the rifle to another look for himself. "But there's only one dinosaur. That scaly, blue, oversized animal over there is without doubt the rarest creature on the planet. The only one in the world, the one I must have his head on my wall. Why, if I had his head of a dinosaur on my wall, I would be famous. I'd go down in hunting history. I'd be the greatest hunter of all time." At that moment, he tightened his grip on his rifle and took his aim at the dinosaur. But the dinosaur was moving around fast. The hunter had realised that he was sniffing the snow, searching for something. He jumped from one side of the sleigh to the other, sniffing the footprints, ducking in and out of the ranger's legs. He was a tricky, moving target for Hunter, who had no experience of shooting dinosaurs. "Keep still, you little," said Hunter, mumbled as he climbed out of his hiding place onto the rooftop to get a better shot. He walked round the chimney, trying to keep the dinosaur in his sight. The hunter took one step and the dinosaur skipped behind the sleigh. The hunter took another step and the dinosaur hopped up to the ledge on the chimney. The hunter took one more step and swoosh, bang! The hunter stepped right off the edge of the rooftop and fell 10 metres into the bushes below with a thud, sending a gunshot ringing up into the sky. He'd been so transfixed by the dinosaurs that he'd failed to realise that he'd been walking towards the edge of the roof. The sound of Hunter's sky-bound gunshot made the Christmasaurus jump so hard that he lost his footing on the edge of the chimney and slipped right into the magical inflated hole. He fell down the chimney, flew into the sooty darkness of the fireplace. The Christmasaurus was in William's house. See you later.